4, 5, and 6, we are finding solutions in an interval for a trigonometric equation with a squared function again, but this time we want to think about it in the form of a quadratic equation. So if I take out the word cosines, I would have x squared minus 2x minus 3. And I want to think about how I would factor that. So if I'm going to factor that, I would have x and x. Since the end is negative, a plus and a minus. Factors of 3, I'd have to have a minus 3 and a plus 1 to get the minus 2 in the middle. I'm going to replace my x's with cosine of x. So the cosine of x plus 1 times the cosine of x minus 3 equals 0, and I now have it in factored form. So now I'm going to solve these like I did the ones in factored form. I'm basically going to split them into two different problems. So either my cosine of x is going to equal negative 1, or my cosine of x would equal positive 3. So I'm then going to just grab my table and look. Under my cosine, where does it equal negative 1? At pi, if I look, that's the only place I see a negative 1. Where does my cosine equal 3? If I look down my list, there is nowhere that it equals 3. And so on this one, the only answer I'm going to have is just pi. So number 5, again, if I look at this one, I'm looking for tangent. But if I think about it without the word tangent, I would say x squared minus x equals 0. If I'm going to factor that, I'm going to factor out one of my x's and take out the greatest common factor. So I'd have x times x minus 1 equals 0, right? If I take an x out of here, I have an x left. X out of there, I have minus 1. So replacing my x's with the word tangent, I would have the tangent of x times tangent of x minus 1 equals 0. So if I took this times this, I get this. This times that, I get that. And so it checks out that if I multiply it out, it's what I originally started with. Excuse me. So breaking this down into my two problems, either the tangent of x equals 0 or the tangent of x equals, or tangent of x, trying to skip a step, minus 1 equals 0, so the tangent of x equals 1. So I'm going to look for all my values where either the tangent of x equals 0 or 1. Looking under my tangent column, I equal 0 at 0 and at pi. Again, it's under the 2 pi, but we're not including the 2 pi in our answer because we have the parenthesis there, not the bracket. And where does the tangent equal 1? Pi over 4 and 5 pi over 4. So nothing repeats there. We have 0, pi, pi over 4, and 5 pi over 4. And all four of those would go in for our answer then. Number 6. Again, if we think about this one, we would have 4x squared plus 4x plus 1 equals 0, taking out the word sign. And so if I'm going to factor that, 4x squared, I'm going to try 2x and 2x. My signs are both pluses. And if I do 1, I get 2x plus 2x, which is the 4x in the middle. So that factors out. So I would say that I have 2 sine of x plus 1 times 2 sine of x plus 1 equals 0. And again, I could FOIL that out just to double check it, but that should be good. In this case, both of my factors are the same, so it's going to give me the same value. So I'm just going to solve one of them. If 2 sine of x plus 1 equals 0, 2 sine of x would equal negative 1, so sine of x would equal negative 1/2. And so I'm going to look at my table for where does the sine of x equals negative 1/2. And if I look down my list, I am at 7 pi over 6. And I am at 11 pi over 6. So at 7 pi over 6 and 11 pi over 6, my sine of x equals -1/2.